Hello everyone, I am Sandag of BECE 2nd Year, and my part is to discuss with you about critical literacy and also to discuss with you a brief background of critical literacy theory. Now, when we say critical literacy, it is a central thinking skill that a tertiary education seeks to develop in students. It also involves the questioning and examination of ideas and requires you to synthesize, analyze, interpret, evaluate, and respond to the text you read or listen to. In other words, critical literacy is a learning approach where students are expected to examine various texts to understand the relationship between language and the power it can hold. The philosophy behind critical literacy is that it is necessary to learn how language works in order to be a more skilled user of language in terms of comprehending, composing, and addressing social inequities. According to Fryer 1987 and Luke 2012, from a philosophical perspective, critical literacy is the belief that interpreting literature is more than simply decoding the words of a text, and it is necessary to understand that language is a social construct and that it is never neutral. It is used to inform, entertain, persuade, and manipulate. According to Fiske 1989, knowledge is never neutral. It never exists in an empiricist, objective relationship to the real, and knowledge is power, and the circulation of knowledge is part of the social distribution of power. And also another one from Alloway and Gilbert in the year 1997 that it says that becoming critically literate offers opportunities for boys as well as for girls to arrive at new insights into personal and social relations, to understand the construction of their own selves as contemporary social subjects, and to recognize the ways in which various social language practices have become naturalized and normalized within everyday talk and action. Now, let us proceed to history of critical literacy theory. The term critical literacy was developed by social critical theorists concerned with dismantling social injustice and inequalities. And also early scholarship in critical literacy is grounded in Freirean pedagogy. Freirean pedagogy is the belief that teaching should challenge learners to examine power structures and patterns of inequality within the status quo. In the year 1987, Fryer and Macedo published their expensive volume on literacy and critical pedagogy. In that volume, these two argued that those who are critically literate that can understand not only how meaning is socially constructed within texts, but also in political and economic contexts were created and embedded. By the year of 1993, Lancashire and Maclaren issued that By the year 1993, Lancashire and Maclaren issued what was to become the seminal text devoted to the topic. Lancashire and Maclaren stated that literacy is more complex than the traditionally defined skills of reading and writing. By saying traditionally, it defines literacy as ideologically or inherently exploitative. By contrast, critical literacy emphasized the social construction of reading, writing, and text production within the political context of inequitable economic, cultural, political, and institutional structures. And again, Lancashire and Maclaren argued for critical reflective teaching and research focused on both forms, that literate skills take as a social pictures and the uses to which those skills are employed. And then Lancashire and McLaren identified three forms of educational practice that critical literacy can take on. The very first one is varying by their commitment to inquiry and action. And then the second one is liberal education. When we say liberal education, it is an approach to disciplinary knowledge where intellectual freedom exists and where disparate interpretations are considered, but inevitably, contradiction is avoided and rational argumentation wins out. The last one is pluralism and transformative praxis. The term praxis here is defined based on the Fraverian in the year 1970 process of naming the conditions of oppressions and struggling collectively with others in cycle of action and then reflection and then action again against such oppressions. But in defining transformative practice as that which takes the radical potential of critical literacy into direct emancipatory action in the world. But in Lancashire and McLaren argue that transformative critical literacy praxis involves an analysis attempting to understand how agents working within established structure of power participate in the social construction of literacies, revealing their potential implications. And then Lancashire and McLaren called that political and social literacies. It actually involves textual studies that are analyzed at the discursive level in which the texts were created, in which they are sustained, while other authors sees this as potentially subversive. They forwarded a key distinction centering on the difference between political and indoctrination and the development of critical consciousness of what Fryer called conscientization. The word conscientization here is defined as the process of developing a critical awareness of one's social reality through reflection and action. Action is fundamental because it is the process of changing the reality. Just in 2001, reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act or ESA as the controversial of No Child Left Behind Act or NCLB. And then Junks in year 2000 cited four possible orientations for future approaches to critical literacy education based on different perspective of relationship between language and power. The first one approach or the letter A is to understand how language maintains social and political forms of domination. And letter B, to provide access to dominant forms of language without compromising the integrity of non-dominant forms. And then the letter C is to promote a diversity which requires attention to the way that uses of languages create social identities. And then the last but not the least is to bring a design perspective that emphasizes the need to use and select from a wide range of available cultural sign systems. And that's the end of my discussion. Thank you for listening.